Shana Tova, everyone, and good Shabbos again. One of my favorite stories about Israel was in 1947, when relations between the British governing authority and the Jews living in Israel were not good. The story goes that Chaim, a Moshavnik, is caught by the British and imprisoned for gun running for the Haganah, the pre-state Jewish army. He's sitting in a British military prison, and his wife Henya sends him a letter. She writes, "Chaim, it's all very well for you to go be a hero for the Jewish people, but meanwhile, we have a farm to run, and I have a field to plow because now is the time to plant potatoes. How am I going to do it if you are in prison?" The next morning, Chaim sits down and writes Henya a letter. He says, "Henya, don't touch the ground. There are rifles buried underneath." The letter is intercepted by the British military authorities. The next morning, the farm is overrun by British soldiers. They dig up every single inch of the ground, and they don't find one single rifle. Dejected, they return to their base. The next morning, Chaim writes Henya, "Now plant potatoes." Yes, the great ingenuity of the early Zionists. And that creativity, that resilience, continues today. The Zionist spirit, I believe, is alive and well in Israel. And it's incredible the amount of external enemies Israel has faced in her 75 years that we celebrated this year. 50 years after the Yom Kippur War, those battles continue. But despite these great challenges, as Israel has now turned 75, I'm also concerned about something else. On a recent trip to Israel, I rode the new high-speed train that connects Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. It now takes just 35 minutes to get between those cities. It's breathtaking, traveling across the sacred soil of the Holy Land in such record time. It was predicted. Theodor Herzl, the father of modern Zionism, wrote his first novel, The Old New Land, in 1902. The novel describes a Jewish state restored, its cities connected by wondrous electric trains high in the air. Herzl believed, and the vision has been fulfilled. He proclaimed, "In tirtzu, ein zo agada." If you will it, it is no dream. How right he was. After my trip to Israel this summer, I took my two sons to Germany. It was time to show them what happened to their great-grandparents when everything changed in 1933. Every time we got on a train, I thought about their family members who were murdered because of German trains. If only a Jewish state would have existed, maybe they would have survived. And yet, even after the Holocaust, for many years, Israel was still considered essential for us American Jews. No matter what may happen here, we American Jews could escape to Israel. It was our possible place of refuge. So my parents and childhood rabbis taught me to make Israel a core part of my Jewish identity. But today I'm worried. Certainly there are Jews in America for whom Israel is still essential. But this group is primarily older. Today, the idea that Israel is important because it's a place of refuge does not hold true for a large number of younger Jews. For too many under the age of 40, Israel is not at all important. Last spring, an American Jewish Committee survey revealed that not even half of American Jewish millennials consider Israel a vital part of their Jewish identity. In another study, 65% don't believe that caring about Israel is an essential part of being Jewish. Many of them admit the Jewish state is just not important to them. Yes, there are younger Jews who spend time there doing summers or gap years. These programs do help make an important dent in the paradigm being drawn. But it's not enough. As we celebrate Israel's 75th, I'm concerned about the future. Now, you may say, Rabbi, why should our young care? We live in Houston, far away. It's not like the old days. There are no longer barriers to where they can go to school, live, and work. Why should Israel be important to them? They have enough issues to deal with here. Maybe they would be better off if they didn't have to worry about the constant conflicts there. Or you may be thinking, yes, I know anti-Semitism has increased, but in America, we're still safe and secure. Even in the unlikely event that something happened, there are plenty of places we could go. Canada, Bahamas, Costa Rica. Costa Rica is pretty awesome. Why spend so much time and resources helping a tiny country so far away? In increasing numbers, younger Jews around this country are asking these questions. On this day, I want to give you my answer. To begin, I must start with the very first Jews, Abraham and Sarah. The first commandment God gives to them, go from your country to the land I will show you. Their religious journey begins with a pilgrimage to Israel. Their entire destiny focuses on the dream of building a nation in that place. The same for their offspring. In fact, you may not know, but the covenantal relationship between God and our ancestors is based upon God's promises to promote the Jewish nation inside the land. Genesis makes it clear that Zionism is central to our ancestors' sacred mission. So does the book of Exodus. Our ancestors, as you know, left Egypt and traveled 40 years in the Sinai to reach the country of milk and honey. Generations of Jews would follow in their footsteps, not just Abraham and Sarah, King David and King Solomon, Isaiah and Jeremiah, Deborah and Ruth, Judah Maccabee, Hillel, and Rabbi Akiba. The list goes on and on. Then Jews who knew little else still heard the call of Lech Lecha, go forth to the land, and from the furthest reaches of exile would find their way home. Our ancestors never let go of the dream, even in the worst of times. For much of our history, the actual return of our people to its biblical homeland must have seemed as a cruel and unattainable illusion. But even then, Jewish prayer was full of verses beseeching the Almighty for a return to Zion in Jerusalem. As we still do today, 3 times a day, our people would pray in the Amidah for the ending of the diaspora. God, gather us together from the 4 corners of the earth. Blessed are you, Lord, who gathers the dispersed of your people. Mekabetz nidchei amo Yisrael. Next week, at the end of Yom Kippur, just like they did, we will proclaim Hashanah Haba'ah b'Yerushalayim. Next year in Jerusalem, my favorite part of that day. And we will do so again at our Passover Seders. Even at our happiest moments, under the huppah, we continue to break a glass to signify the loss of Jewish sovereignty. There are still hundreds of commandments that can only be performed within the land of Israel. 1/3 of the Talmud deals with religious laws connected just to Jerusalem. Zionism, the righteous belief in our return to our ancient homeland, and Judaism have always been intimately connected. Theologically and practically, there really is no daylight between the two. Despite the existence of some non-Zionists throughout our history, I think it's a profound misreading of our history to call Judaism anything other than a land-centered faith. Our eyes have always been turned east for a reason. We don't support the modern state just because it will be there as our safe haven in case something goes wrong here. You can only practice Judaism with the steadfast belief in a Jewish country in our ancestral home. Israel is the legitimate fulfillment of our people's 2,000-year-old religious hope and vision. My friends, this new year, can we say to all of our precious young, especially to those who are questioning their commitment to Israel, from biblical times to the Middle Ages to our world today, to be a Jew is to be a Zionist. It's that simple, with no apologies, without hesitation. Can we proclaim, if you don't consider yourself a Zionist, if you don't support the modern Jewish state, you're free to do so. You're still Jewish. But by making that choice, please know you are no longer practicing Judaism. For all of us, young and old, I believe to practice Judaism in 2023 means to ask ourselves, what am I doing to make a difference? Am I doing enough to support the Jewish state, to help her thrive? Am I visiting enough? And am I convincing enough people that the Jewish state has a fundamental right to exist? Elected officials and journalists, even my neighbors and colleagues at work, and of course, our own precious young. In our day and age, people like to talk about spirituality, but let us not forget, Judaism creates spirituality not through the mind or our hearts. That's not being Jewish, but through our hands, by our work, by our actions. Doing something every day to help is a hands-on way to make a spiritual connection. To feel connected to Eretz Yisrael, the land, and Medinat Yisrael, the modern state, is something I would argue is truly transcendent, even mystical. Can we all do our share? And will we teach all of our young, all of those who come after us, to do the same? Now, it doesn't mean we have to support Israel and support all decisions Israeli leaders make. Yes, you and I, we may disagree with some of those choices. And let me say this clearly. I've always said, if all of our Israeli education is mythical to the point where we teach that the country is perfect, our precious young Jews will be unprepared for the messy, complex reality of a modern state. And they will be unprepared for the assault on Israel they will face wherever they go to college. Yes, I think we should prepare our young to defend Israel by teaching them everything, the good and the not so good. We can be open with our comments, articulate our disagreements, but at the same time, let us be careful. When we give those critiques, we make sure they're done out of love. We don't have to be silent, I believe, if our views remain grounded in fairness. Or as Israeli writer Yossi Klein Halevi writes, can we critique Israel like a mother, not a mother-in-law? Let us not raise our young to be constant detractors who are fixated on endless, bitter criticisms that lack objectivity, or God forbid, some do, join organizations that work to tear down and destroy the Jewish state. Some of the most anti-Israel organizations are actually full of young, naive Jewish students who call for boycotts and sanctions. Some even call for her destruction. Calling for the end of the world's only Jewish state is jeopardizing the safety and security of millions of our brothers and sisters. We should never accept criticism that crosses the line into the negation of the state's right to exist. By definition, that's anti-Semitism, even if it's coming from fellow Jews. Yes, if our children become adults who only attend rallies against Israel and have nothing to say about Russia or China, Iran or North Korea, then we went too far. We can offer constructive critiques without becoming destructive. We can question without becoming harmful. We can want Israel to be even better while still loving her. And right now, especially right now, we can serve as an example to our young. I don't agree with some of the members of Israel's current government. I personally don't like all of their positions. And I have been openly concerned about the current ruling coalition's attempt to overhaul Israeli Supreme Court without building a national consensus. It's disturbing. And I know many of you are also disturbed. And add in the fact that some Israeli leaders are working to discredit non-Orthodox movements like ours. Just some, a minority, but a vocal minority. So we may be tempted to pull away, to give up on all of our support. But I would argue now is the time not to walk away. Now is the time to become even more involved. Because I will tell you more than ever, like-minded Israelis are begging for our help. We can only work to make positive change if you and I, mainstream Jews, conservative Jews, in Zionist congregations like ours, do even more. Yes, we may not like some things the Jewish state does, especially right now. Israel is an imperfect place, and so is America. Yet I still love this country with everything I have and try to do everything I can to help. I know you do too. I still love plenty of people that are also not perfect. My children are great, but let me assure you, as wonderful as they are far from perfect, especially now that they're in college. Yes, I do miss those third and fourth grade years when I think they kind of were perfect. But when I offer my children constructive criticism, if they listen to me, it's done out of love. It's to help them. And I like to think they're better for it. I believe we don't have to be silent if our words and actions remain grounded in a true and genuine concern. Because I too am concerned right now. And that way we can actually make a difference. Yes, we have our disagreements with some Israelis, but all of them are still our Jewish brothers and sisters. All of them. And honestly, for me, any Israeli who sends their children to the army or serves themselves is my hero. In my book, that's a larger mitzvah than anything I have ever done. The least I could do is work my hardest to support them in the numerous challenges Israel faces today, faces this year, and will continue to face in the future. As a modern Jewish state celebrates 75 years, I cannot help but reflect on the fact that twice in history, in biblical times, a Jewish state arose in the land, and both times it collapsed before reaching its 80th year. Can we all do our part to not allow, God forbid, a third destruction? To conclude, my favorite all-time essay about Israel was actually written not by a rabbi or an Israeli scholar, but by a non-Jewish colleague. It's entitled The Miracle of Israel. It was written by the great Christian minister, Reverend Donald Harrington, the former president of St. John's University. He writes, 1900 years after their defeat and destruction, they are reborn again, the land and the people. The desert becomes green again, and the weary land refreshed with the living waters of a people's love. Villages spring up on old ash heaps. Towns and restless cities rise on dunes of drifting sand. And high up in the hills, between the Jordan and the sea, Jerusalem, the queen, city of gold, is shining again in new splendor. How did this miracle come to pass? He concludes, the answer is simple. The Jewish people grew a religion strong in its requirement and responsibility, unremitting in its demands, rich in its rewards and promise. And through every trial and trouble, despite the cruelest persecution, they clung to that religion. They preserved it, and it preserved them as a people. They became a living miracle, and their story has turned into the model and hope of mankind. Yes, I believe the Reverend was right. Over the ages, our religious practices forever connected us to that land, our land, allowing our people to fulfill our eternal dream. 3 years after the Holocaust, perhaps the greatest miracle in the history of humankind. This new year, will you cherish that miracle, or will you only offer unfair criticisms? Will you deeply care, or will you go about as if it doesn't matter? And most importantly, what will our young, the young of our community, if you're blessed, your child, our grandchild, what will they do now and in the future? My friends, no, we did not choose to live during this extraordinary time in Jewish history. But yes, our Judaism demands of us this new year, every day, can we do something to help ensure the miracle continues? Shana Tova. So now, on this year of Israel's 75th anniversary, our teenagers now lead us in Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem. Please rise.
Yehudi homia ufatem Mizrach kodima ein letzion Sophia.
Let us thank our precious young.